The trouble started on an ordinary Saturday morning, the kind of quiet weekend where neighbors trimmed hedges, kids rode bikes down the cul-de-sac, and the homeowners association sent yet another email reminding everyone about community parking standards. For months, the association president, an imposing figure with a brand new SUV and a fondness for petty power, had been making life miserable for almost everyone on the block. Her specialty? Parking enforcement. Or, more accurately, selective parking enforcement. She never parked in her own driveway. Instead, she treated the street like her personal lot, squeezing her vehicle into spaces that didn't belong to her. Sometimes she blocked mailboxes. Other times she left her car angled just enough to make backing out a nightmare. And on this particular Saturday, she parked directly across the apron of one man's driveway, the man who had just finished a grueling week of work and needed to leave. It wasn't the first time she'd done it. In fact, she'd been warned repeatedly, both in person and in writing, but the message never stuck. She seemed to enjoy testing how much her neighbors would tolerate, flashing a smug smile whenever someone dared to complain. The HOA board, stacked with her friends, never took action. Every time someone filed a report, the matter disappeared before any fine could be issued. That morning, the homeowner stood there, keys in hand, staring at the gleaming SUV blocking his escape. He felt his patience thinning, as if the weight of months of small insults were pressing down at once. What had started as an annoyance was beginning to feel like a deliberate provocation. It wasn't about the car anymore, it was about control. She was daring him to push back. He tried calling her. No answer. He sent a text. No reply. Hours ticked by as the sun climbed higher and the temperature rose. The block driveway wasn't just inconvenient. It trapped him in his own home. He thought about calling a tow truck, but everyone knew how that would end. The HOA president would claim it was temporary, and the board would accuse him of overreacting. Worse yet, any towing attempt would result in a barrage of legal threats. As frustration boiled over, he began filming. His phone camera swept over the driveway, capturing the way her SUV jutted across the concrete, making it impossible to exit. He documented the date, the time, even the license plate. Then he walked the street, showing the other open spots she could have used. Evidence, he would need all of it because nothing else had worked. Later that afternoon, she finally emerged. Without so much as a glance, she slipped into her SUV, started the engine, and drove off as if nothing had happened. Not a wave, not an apology, not even a hint of acknowledgement. The audacity was staggering. For a moment, he stood frozen, unsure whether to chase after her or simply take note and move on. But deep down, he knew this wasn't over. This was just another round in a game she thought she was winning. That night, he couldn't shake the thought. If she could do this once, she'd do it again. And if the HOA wasn't going to hold her accountable, he'd have to take matters into his own hands. He stayed up late, scrolling through forums, reading stories of other homeowners who'd battled abusive associations. Most people wrote about fines, lawsuits, and endless frustration. But a few, just a few, had taken bold, unconventional action. The next morning, he woke up with a plan forming in his mind. A plan that was equal parts practical and outrageous. If the president thought she could block his driveway with impunity, then maybe it was time to make sure no blockade could ever stop him again. He imagined a machine so powerful that obstacles wouldn't matter. A machine that wouldn't just move cars out of the way but would crush the very idea of being boxed in. At first, it was just a passing fantasy, something to laugh about over coffee. But the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. Why not rent heavy equipment? Why not make it impossible for her or anyone else to trap him? After all, the street was public, his driveway was his own, and he had every right to access his property. As the sun set that evening, he pulled up a rental website and began scrolling through options. Mini excavators, skid steers, backhoes, and then he saw it, the answer staring back at him in bold letters. Bulldozer, day rental, no special license required. It was big enough to clear anything in its path, but small enough to operate safely in a neighborhood street. A ridiculous idea? Maybe. But the more he pictured it, the more he smiled. Still, part of him hesitated. Was this too much? Would the neighbors turn on him for going this far? Then again, hadn't they all suffered under the HOA president's reign? She fined people for mailboxes being the wrong shade of beige. She sent threatening letters over garden gnomes. If anyone deserved a dramatic wake-up call, it was her. By midnight, the reservation was confirmed. The bulldozer would arrive on Tuesday morning, delivered by a flatbed truck. He didn't tell a soul. Not yet. Let them wonder. Let them all see what happens when one man decides he's had enough. As he closed his laptop, he glanced out the window at his empty driveway. He almost wished she'd park there again tomorrow. One more push, one more insult, and the plan would roll into action, literally. What she didn't know was that the next time she blocked him in, she wouldn't just be facing an angry neighbor. She'd be facing several tons of unstoppable steel. Tuesday morning dawned bright and still, but beneath the calm surface of the neighborhood, tension was building. At precisely 8 o'clock, the rumble of a flatbed truck echoed down the street, shattering the usual suburban silence. Residents peered from their curtains as a hulking yellow bulldozer rolled off the trailer and settled at the end of one man's driveway. The sight alone was enough to spark whispers and frantic texts up and down the block. The homeowner stood on his porch with his phone in hand, recording every moment. This wasn't just for show. He needed an airtight record. The HOA president had a habit of twisting events, rewriting reality to suit her version of the truth. This time, there would be no dispute about what happened, no way to paint him as the villain without hard evidence to the contrary. As the delivery truck rumbled off, the massive machine sat like a coiled predator, bright paint gleaming under the morning sun. It looked absurd in the middle of a quiet cul-de-sac lined with well-kept lawns and flower beds, but its very absurdity was the point. This was not a neighborhood where heavy construction equipment appeared without reason. And yet, the reason would soon make itself very clear. By mid-morning, the street was alive with speculation. A few neighbors wandered outside under the pretense of walking dogs or checking mail, casting sidelong glances at the machine. The homeowner ignored them, focusing on his camera and the angles he needed. He filmed the entire setup, the delivery, the inspection, even the way the bulldozer's blade gleamed like a warning sign. Then, like clockwork, the HOA president struck again. Her luxury SUV glided into view just before noon, sliding into place exactly where she knew she wasn't supposed to park, across the apron of the driveway, blocking any chance of exit. If she noticed the massive bulldozer sitting there, she gave no indication. Perhaps she assumed it was part of some unrelated project. Perhaps she didn't care. Her message was clear. She made the rules, not anyone else. The homeowner didn't confront her. He didn't shout or wave his arms. He simply kept filming as she walked away, leaving her vehicle planted squarely in the wrong spot. His heart pounded, not from anger, but from the sheer anticipation of what was about to unfold. When the street cleared and no one was watching too closely, he climbed into the bulldozer's cab. The seat was stiff, the controls heavy and mechanical, but the machine came alive with a roar that reverberated through every house on the block. Curtains twitched, doors cracked open. The homeowner adjusted his camera to capture the entire scene. This wasn't just about getting out of his driveway, it was about showing that he would no longer be pushed around. With deliberate precision, he lowered the blade. The machine crept forward, its treads grinding against the asphalt, closing the distance to the obstructing SUV inch by inch. He didn't touch the vehicle, not yet. Instead, he demonstrated just how easily he could have. The steel blade hovered mere inches from the shiny paint, a warning frozen in time on film. He recorded every angle, every movement, documenting that he was clearing his own path without causing harm. Then he shifted gears and drove directly down his own driveway, nudging aside the loose gravel and overgrown weeds that had collected near the curb. The bulldozer didn't need to touch the SUV to make its point. The sheer presence of the machine was enough. When the blade finally lowered to the pavement and scooped a shallow trench along the edge of his property, it was clear he now had a way to exit no matter who tried to block him. The obstruction was irrelevant. He could literally carve his own road if he wanted to. By the time the HOA president returned to her car, the neighborhood was buzzing. Dozens of cell phones had captured snippets of the roaring engine, the yellow machine looming like a mechanical beast. She froze when she saw the driveway cleared and the bulldozer parked squarely at its mouth, as if guarding it. The homeowner remained calm, continuing to film silently as she fumbled with her keys and sped off. Her pride clearly wounded, but her arrogance undiminished. The footage spread quickly among the residents. Word of mouth traveled even faster than the videos, and by that evening, everyone on the street knew what had happened. Some laughed quietly behind closed doors. Others worried about what would come next. The HOA board held an emergency meeting via conference call, but their options were limited. Technically, no rules had been broken. The driveway was clear. The bulldozer rental was entirely legal, and every second of the event was documented in high definition. For the first time, the president was on the defensive. Her allies scrambled to find a violation they could pin on the homeowner, but there was nothing. No property damage, no blocked street, no harm done to her vehicle. The machine had done its job without crossing any lines. Still, the confrontation had escalated the simmering feud into an open war. The homeowner knew it wasn't over. She would retaliate, she always did. But this time he wasn't afraid. If she thought a few parking games could intimidate him, she had just learned otherwise. He began organizing his evidence into folders, time-stamped and labeled, ready to send to the city if necessary. He even considered starting a YouTube channel to share the story publicly, not for revenge, but to shine a light on the abuse of power so many homeowners faced under petty HOA leadership. Night fell over the neighborhood, but the tension didn't fade. The bulldozer sat under a streetlight, casting a long shadow across the pavement, a silent guardian against anyone foolish enough to test its operator. The homeowner reviewed his footage one last time, satisfied that he now had leverage. He suspected the next move wouldn't come in the form of a car blocking his driveway. It would come as something sneakier, a violation notice, a fine, maybe even a legal threat. Whatever it was, he was ready. He had drawn a line in the sand, and this time it wasn't going to be crossed without a fight. The morning after the bulldozer incident, the homeowner awoke to find a crisp white envelope taped to his front door. No stamp, no return address, just his name scrawled across the front. Inside was a printed notice, typed in the cold, formal language of bureaucracy. The HOA board had convened an emergency disciplinary review to discuss his reckless operation of heavy machinery within the community. The letter threatened fines, legal action, and even a potential lien against his home if he failed to comply with community safety standards. It was exactly what he expected. The HOA president had wasted no time weaponizing the rules she so often ignored herself. But this time, the homeowner was ready. Every second of the bulldozer's movement was on video, proof that nothing had been damaged, no law broken, no neighbors endangered. Still, the tone of the letter was unmistakable. They intended to crush him through intimidation. The retaliation didn't stop there. Within a week, the HOA issued 3 separate violation notices. One accused him of improper storage of construction equipment, despite the bulldozer being returned the same day it was delivered. Another claimed his driveway was non-compliant due to surface alterations, a reference to the shallow trench he'd carved at its edge to prevent blockages. The third accused him of creating a nuisance by attracting attention from non-residents, as if curious neighbors peeking through curtains counted as trespassing. Each letter arrived with an escalating fine attached. First $250, then $500, then $1,000. The amounts were absurd, designed not to correct behavior but to break his will. The homeowner filed formal appeals for each notice, attaching his carefully organized video evidence. He sent certified copies to the city as well, just in case the HOA tried to bury the paperwork. Meanwhile, the neighborhood was split. Some residents admired his bold stand and quietly cheered him on. Others worried about the fallout, whispering that he was poking the bear and making things worse for everyone. But no matter which side they were on, everyone was watching. The quiet suburban street had become a battleground, and every new development rippled through the community like a shockwave. The HOA president grew bolder, strutting through the neighborhood as if daring someone to challenge her authority. She parked her SUV even closer to his driveway, sometimes leaving it there for hours. When confronted by other residents about her behavior, she waved off their concerns and claimed she was documenting safety hazards. Her allies on the board echoed the same talking points, insisting the bulldozer was a threat to children and pets, even though no children had been outside during the incident, and not a single paw print or scratch appeared on the pavement. The homeowner didn't rise to her bait. He stayed calm, quietly documenting everything. His cameras now covered every angle of his property, recording day and night. He invested in higher capacity memory cards and set up cloud backups. If the HOA wanted to play dirty, he would simply outlast them with proof. Then, without warning, the fight escalated again. A certified letter arrived from the HOA's attorney, claiming that his actions had devalued surrounding properties and demanding immediate payment of outstanding fines, now totaling $1,750, or face legal action. The language was aggressive, full of threats about liens, lawsuits, and court fees. It was clear they weren't just trying to punish him for the bulldozer, they were trying to make an example out of him. Instead of backing down, the homeowner doubled down. He contacted his own attorney and shared the mountain of evidence he'd collected. Together, they prepared a countercomplaint alleging harassment, selective enforcement of HOA rules, and abuse of power by the board. The videos showed everything. The president repeatedly blocking his driveway, the bulldozer maneuvered with precision and care, the absence of any damage or danger. If the board wanted a legal fight, they were going to get one. But the homeowner had an even bigger idea brewing in the background. He started editing the footage into a narrative, clear, chronological, and impossible to dispute. Clips of the president parking illegally, shots of the bulldozer being delivered, close-ups of the blade hovering just shy of her vehicle, proving he never touched it. He overlaid timestamps, captions, and even aerial footage from a borrowed drone to show the layout of the street. When the video was ready, he uploaded it to a new YouTube channel. Within days, the video began to gain traction. Viewers loved the David versus Goliath story. One homeowner standing up to an arrogant HOA president with a bulldozer and a camera. Comments poured in, praising his calm approach and mocking the president's hypocrisy. By the end of the week, the video had racked up tens of thousands of views, and the HOA board was furious. The president called an emergency in-person meeting, summoning residents to the community center. Flyers appeared on every mailbox, warning that the neighborhood's reputation was at risk. The implication was clear. The homeowner wasn't just fighting the HOA anymore. He was being painted as a threat to the entire community. But the tide was turning. Residents who had quietly endured years of petty fines and intimidation began speaking up. They whispered in corners, traded stories about the president's double standards, and even offered to testify on the homeowner's behalf. The bulldozer video had done more than defend one man's driveway. It had exposed the rot at the heart of the association. As the day of the emergency meeting approached, the homeowner prepared for the showdown. He printed copies of his evidence for distribution. He brought backup drives containing every video file. And, just in case things got ugly, he arranged for a local reporter to attend. This wouldn't just be a closed-door scolding. This would be public. The night before the meeting, the homeowner stood in his driveway, looking at the quiet street illuminated by a single flickering lamppost. He knew the fight wasn't just about parking anymore. It was about power, accountability, and the right to live without fear in one's own home. The HOA president had pushed him too far, and now the entire neighborhood would see the truth. The evening of the emergency HOA meeting arrived like a gathering storm. The community center parking lot was full long before the meeting began, with neighbors spilling out onto the sidewalk. People came not just to hear the board's official response, but to witness the confrontation everyone knew was inevitable. The air buzzed with nervous anticipation. The HOA president had called the meeting to restore order after the bulldozer incident. But it was clear to anyone paying attention that her grip on power was slipping. The homeowner arrived prepared. He carried a thick binder of printed evidence and a small hard drive containing every second of footage he had gathered. He wore no expression of anger, only the calm determination of someone who knew he was standing on solid ground. Behind him, several neighbors followed, whispering their support as they filed inside. A local reporter, tipped off the night before, stood at the entrance with a notepad in hand, ready to capture whatever unfolded. The room itself felt tense, almost electric. Folding chairs lined up in neat rows quickly filled with residents, some curious, some anxious, and some outright hostile. At the front sat the HOA president, flanked by her allies on the board. Her usual smug composure was replaced with forced authority, her papers stacked neatly in front of her like weapons of bureaucracy. She clearly expected to dominate the evening, to browbeat the homeowner into submission under the glare of community disapproval. The meeting began with a lengthy list of alleged violations, everything from reckless operation of machinery, to endangering neighborhood safety, to disrupting community harmony. Each accusation was read aloud as though it were fact, despite the complete lack of evidence to support them. The board claimed the homeowner's actions had frightened children, caused property damage, and even lowered home values. It was a performance carefully crafted to make him appear as a menace. But then it was his turn. When given the floor, the homeowner calmly produced his binder, laying out the violations against him one by one. For each claim, he presented time-stamped photos, video stills, and written records. The footage showed that the bulldozer never touched the HOA president's car, never crossed onto anyone else's property, and never endangered a soul. The machine had been used only to clear his own driveway, a legal right no HOA could take away. As he presented his evidence, the room began to shift. Whispers rippled through the audience as neighbors recognized the truth staring them in the face. Many had seen the video online already, but seeing the raw footage played out frame by frame left no doubt. The HOA president's narrative unraveled under the weight of cold, hard proof. Her attempts to interrupt, to deflect, were met with quiet but growing disapproval from the residents watching her squirm. The turning point came when the homeowner revealed something new. Along with his own footage, he had collected statements from other residents who had suffered similar harassment. Photos of their violations. Mailboxes painted the wrong shade of beige, garden decorations threatened with removal, parking tickets issued without cause, painted a clear picture of abuse of power. It was no longer just one man versus the HOA president. It was the entire neighborhood against her petty regime. The reporter scribbled furiously, capturing every detail. What had begun as a local parking dispute was now a story about leadership gone wrong, about a small suburban board run like a personal fiefdom. The president's carefully maintained image as a protector of property values crumbled in real time. By the time the homeowner finished, the mood of the room had completely flipped. Instead of nods of agreement with the board, there were frowns, shaking heads, and even murmurs of anger directed at the president. Residents openly questioned why she repeatedly parked across his driveway, why the board ignored complaints against her, and why fines were selectively enforced against those who challenged her authority. The HOA president attempted to regain control, hammering the table and declaring that rules must be obeyed. But her voice carried less weight now. The authority she wielded so confidently just weeks before felt hollow. Her allies on the board looked uneasy, shifting in their seats as they realized public opinion was no longer on their side. In a last-ditch effort to save face, she proposed an immediate vote to impose even steeper fines on the homeowner for endangering community safety. But before she could push it through, residents began to speak out, questioning the legality of her actions and demanding transparency. Calls for a full audit of HOA records echoed through the room. Someone suggested a recall vote to remove her from office entirely. The meeting, intended to crush one man, had instead ignited a full-scale rebellion. The homeowner stayed calm through it all, knowing he didn't need to raise his voice. His evidence spoke louder than any accusation. He quietly handed copies of his files to the reporter, ensuring that even if the board tried to bury the story, the truth would reach the public. As the meeting dissolved into chaos, the president abruptly adjourned the session and stormed out, her face pale with fury. Her once loyal supporters followed her in awkward silence, sensing that their reign over the neighborhood was ending. The residents lingered behind, talking excitedly, forming small groups, and openly discussing plans to challenge the board's authority. That night, The homeowner returned home to find more than just relief waiting for him. Several neighbors stopped by to offer their support, slipping notes of encouragement into his mailbox or sending messages thanking him for standing up to the bullying they had endured for years. What had started as a single dispute over a block driveway had grown into a community-wide call for change. But the battle wasn't over. The HOA president was wounded, and wounded people lash out. The homeowner knew she would try one last desperate move, something bigger and bolder than parking her SUV in front of his driveway. She would find a way to strike back, even if it meant breaking her own rules to do it. As he reviewed his files late into the night, he prepared for whatever came next. The bulldozer may have cleared his driveway, but the real fight, the fight for his home, his rights, and his neighborhood was only just beginning. The days following the explosive HOA meeting were quiet on the surface, but beneath the calm, something sinister was brewing. The president had been publicly humiliated, her authority questioned, and her allies fractured. She was not the type to accept defeat gracefully. While residents whispered about organizing a recall vote and the local reporter prepared an article about the abuse of power, she was planning her counterattack. It began subtly. A new set of violation notices appeared in the homeowner's mailbox, each one more absurd than the last. One claimed that his trash bins were visible for longer than 5 minutes on pickup day. Another cited the color of his porch light as non-conforming. Yet another accused him of having excessive tire marks on his driveway, a thinly veiled jab at the bulldozer incident. These were harassment tactics, pure and simple, meant to overwhelm him with paperwork and legal threats. But when these petty attempts failed to intimidate him, she escalated. Late one night, surveillance footage caught her SUV circling the block slowly, headlights off. The homeowner's cameras, now upgraded and motion-activated, recorded everything. She wasn't just monitoring him. She was hunting for something she could use against him. 2 mornings later, the neighborhood awoke to chaos. Someone had spray-painted the words, "Danger to Community," across the homeowner's driveway in large, dripping letters. A few shrubs on the edge of his property were hacked down. Several garbage bags had been dumped across his lawn. It was blatant vandalism, and everyone knew who was behind it. But without direct evidence, proving it would be tricky. The HOA president seized the moment, claiming that this backlash was proof of community outrage against him. She distributed flyers accusing the homeowner of creating a hostile environment, warning that his antics were lowering property values. She even called for an emergency vote to have his driveway declared a safety hazard, threatening to pursue legal action to force him to remove the alterations he had made when clearing it with the bulldozer. The homeowner, however, remained calm. He reviewed his security footage and discovered a crucial piece of evidence: a grainy image of her SUV parked near his home at the exact time the vandalism occurred. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was enough to raise serious questions about her involvement. He sent copies of the footage to his attorney, to the local reporter, and to a few trusted neighbors. If she wanted a war, he would fight it with facts, not speculation. Meanwhile, his YouTube video continued to gain traction. What had started as a simple documentation of one incident had grown into a viral sensation. Viewers around the world were captivated by the story of one man standing up to a tyrannical HOA president with a bulldozer. Donations and offers of support began to pour in. Lawyers specializing in HOA abuse reached out, offering free consultations. Other homeowners shared their own horror stories in the comments, creating a growing movement against petty, power-hungry boards. As the momentum shifted further in his favor, the HOA president doubled down. She called another closed-door board meeting, barring the public and excluding even some of her usual allies. From behind those locked doors, she hatched her boldest plan yet, filing a lawsuit against the homeowner, claiming emotional distress, property damage, and defamation. She demanded tens of thousands of dollars in damages, a sum so outrageous it revealed her true intention. Not justice, but financial ruin. The homeowner was ready. When the legal papers arrived, he calmly added them to his growing pile of evidence. His attorney quickly filed a counterclaim, accusing the HOA of harassment, retaliation, and abuse of power. The case was heading to court, and the president's reckless decision to escalate the fight would soon backfire. But he had one more card to play. As he prepared for the coming legal battle, he assembled a second video, this one far more detailed, incorporating not only the bulldozer footage but also every violation notice, every absurd fine, every instance of harassment, and even the security footage hinting at her role in the vandalism. He planned to release it the day before the court hearing, ensuring that public opinion would be firmly on his side. In the meantime, the neighborhood reached a boiling point. Residents who once feared the president now openly confronted her. A petition circulated calling for her removal from the board, and within days, more than half the community had signed it. The walls of her authority were collapsing around her, but she refused to step down. Her pride wouldn't allow it. The night before the hearing, the homeowner uploaded his new video. It went live at midnight, and by morning it had already gone viral. News outlets picked it up, legal analysts dissected it, and commenters flooded in with outrage over the HOA's blatant misconduct. The president woke up to find her name trending for all the wrong reasons. As she drove to the courthouse the next day, she passed neighbors holding signs of support for the homeowner. Some even filmed her as she went by, knowing the entire saga had become a public spectacle. The president's plan to quietly crush one man had turned into a national embarrassment. Inside the courthouse, the tension was palpable. The homeowner sat calmly with his attorney, evidence neatly organized, ready to present the truth. Across the aisle, the president shuffled her papers nervously, her confidence shaken. The board members who once backed her sat a few rows away, avoiding eye contact. They knew this had gone too far. The case had not yet been heard, but one thing was already clear. Her power over the neighborhood was slipping away, replaced by the undeniable weight of public scrutiny and legal accountability. The fallout from the bulldozer incident was swift and impossible for the HOA to contain. By the time police arrived, the scene was already swarming with neighbors filming on their phones. The footage showed everything. The HOA president's car blocking the driveway again, the homeowner calmly warning that he would not tolerate it anymore, and the slow, deliberate movement of the rented bulldozer pushing the obstruction out of the way. There was no yelling, no chaos, only the raw power of heavy machinery forcing open a path that should never have been blocked in the first place. Within hours, the video hit social media. It spread across neighborhood Facebook groups, then to local news, and finally to national platforms. Headlines screamed about the audacity of both parties, the HOA's petty abuse of power and the homeowner's bold response. The HOA board scrambled to present a united front, but cracks began to show almost immediately. Several members quietly admitted they had never supported the president's tactics, and now they feared the legal and financial consequences of being associated with her. The police report was damning. It documented the repeated driveway blockages, the homeowner's previous complaints, and the fact that the HOA president had ignored direct warnings to move her vehicle. The bulldozer itself had caused minimal damage. No property other than the offending car was touched. The footage showed the homeowner moving cautiously, deliberately ensuring that nothing else was harmed. That single fact changed everything. While some neighbors initially called the act extreme, most of them quickly shifted their focus to the root cause: the HOA's harassment and abuse of authority. A week later, a formal HOA meeting was called to address the crisis. Attendance exploded. Residents who had never shown up to a meeting before were now packed into the community hall, demanding answers. The president tried to spin the incident as a violent escalation, but the crowd wasn't buying it. People stood up to recount their own frustrations: unreasonable fines, arbitrary rule changes, and threats for the smallest infractions. The bulldozer incident had cracked open years of pent-up anger, and the board members sitting beside the president looked increasingly uncomfortable as they realized they were sitting on a powder keg. As the meeting descended into chaos, the president attempted to assert control, pounding the table and threatening legal action against the homeowner. But it was too late. A motion to remove her from her position was introduced on the spot. Neighbors who had once stayed silent now spoke up, sharing how they had been bullied or intimidated. The vote passed overwhelmingly, stripping her of her title and authority. Meanwhile, the homeowner was already working with a lawyer. He wasn't after money, though damages were certainly on the table, but he wanted permanent protection against HOA harassment. The lawyer drafted a formal agreement barring the HOA from interfering with his property access ever again. If they violated it, hefty penalties would follow. When the new, interim HOA leadership saw the legal threat paired with undeniable video evidence, they quickly signed. They had no appetite for a prolonged fight that would drain the HOA's funds and possibly bankrupt the community. The former president, now facing personal liability, tried to rally a few allies. But even her closest supporters backed away. No one wanted to be on the losing side of a battle that had been broadcast to millions online. News crews showed up at her house. Neighbors whispered about lawsuits. And her once powerful presence in the community dissolved into something closer to infamy. Over the next month, the neighborhood atmosphere changed dramatically. The HOA board, humbled and reshaped by new elections, pledged transparency and fairness. Arbitrary fines stopped appearing on doorsteps. Long overdue repairs to shared spaces were finally approved. And most importantly, the harassment ended. The homeowner's driveway remained clear, his property untouched. Neighbors who once avoided him now waved and smiled, some even thanking him for taking a stand that had freed them all from years of petty tyranny. The video of the Bulldozer incident continued to circulate online. It became a symbol of standing up to abuse, an unforgettable reminder that ordinary people could push back against overreach when pushed too far themselves. The homeowner never glorified what he did. He told reporters he wished it hadn't come to that. But he also made it clear that no one, not even a power-hungry HOA president, had the right to trap him in his own home. In the end, the neighborhood settled into a strange calm. The bulldozer was returned long ago, the driveway was open, and the homeowner could finally go about his life without constant interference. The HOA learned a painful lesson. When authority is abused, people will eventually fight back, sometimes with unstoppable force. And while the scars of the conflict lingered, they served as a warning to anyone tempted to misuse their position again. The balance of power in the neighborhood had shifted permanently, all because one man decided he'd had enough and refused to be blocked any longer. The saga closed not with more confrontation, but with quiet victory. The homeowner had his peace, the HOA had been reformed, and the community, for the first time in years, could breathe. 7.